Joining me now is Republican Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Before we get to politics, I do want to start with this horrific anti-Semitic attack in New York. Last night, Governor Cuomo just said that he's going to push for a law in the state of New York to make these kinds of attacks domestic terrorism. Would you support a law like that at a national level?
Well, I'd want to see the law that the governor's talking about. You know, America's a big, wide open, pluralistic country. I don't think any of us want to live in a police state. Freedom has risk. Having said that, these are people who have hate in their heart. And I don't buy and never have bought the proposition that people who do these reprehensible things are sick necessarily, or confused or mixed up. I think some of them are evil. And we've got to get them off the street. And if I make it to heaven, that's the first thing I'm going to ask is why is there evil in the world? And why do people think it's necessary to hate instead of just disagree? I think I think all public officials can try to do a better job of setting an example by being respectful in their disagreement and showing that, well, you can disagree, but you don't have to hate. I just think it's terrible. But all acts of violence are terrible. Not just what happened, as bad as it is in New York. You know, the killings on the streets in Chicago, the anti-Semitic murders elsewhere, the racial murders elsewhere, the same race killings. I mean, all that's horrible, Jake. If I had an answer, I'd go pass a bill. But you can't legislate hate away from people who have it in their heart.
All right, fair enough. Thanks, Senator Kennedy. Let's turn to politics, if we can now. Obviously, the Senate trial is pending, although we don't know when. You have said, quote, "My objective first and foremost is to be fair to both sides." You heard Senator Lisa Murkowski there. Were you also bothered at all when Majority Leader McConnell said there would be no daylight between him and the White House?
I think Senator McConnell is entitled to his opinion and his approach. So is Senator Murkowski. So is Senator Schumer. So is Senator Blumenthal. If you look, Jake, at the Constitution, the standing rules of the Senate, the essays and analyses by the Congressional Research Service, if you look at the case law, Nixon v. U.S., not Richard Nixon, a federal judge named Nixon. If you look at the case of Porteous v. Barron, what you'll see is that when it comes to impeachment, the rule is that there are virtually no substantive rules. It's not a criminal trial. The Senate is not really a jury. It's both jury and judge. The Chief Justice is not the judge. He's the presiding officer. There are no standards of proof. There are no rules of evidence. And every senator, unless we pass a new rule by 51 votes in the Senate, is entitled to approach it his own way. Mm-hmm. I think many positions by many senators are calcified. I can only speak for me. I'm going to keep an open mind. I want to be fair to both sides. When I thought that the House proceedings were unnecessarily unfair, and when the American people walk away from the Senate trial, if we ever have one, I don't want them saying, well, we were just run over by the same truck twice. Mm-hmm. It was unfair in the House and it was unfair in the Senate. I want people to think that it was a level playing field.
So you said earlier this month that in the name of fairness, you would vote, theoretically, to allow Democrats, Republicans, anyone involved in this trial to, quote, call any witness that they want in a Senate trial. Do you think that's the only fair way to do it, to allow Democrats, Republicans, those representing Trump, those House impeachment managers to call the witnesses they feel they need to bring?
Well, the first issue that the Senate's got to decide is whether we hear evidence or hear the case, if you will, based on the record. One point of view is that the House is sort of like a district court. And the Senate, once again, not a perfect analogy, but the Senate is more like an appellate court. and we hear the record as put together by the House. That is what happened in part in the Clinton proceedings. Originally, the Senate heard the prosecution and defense argue the case on the record from the House. Then they decided whether to dismiss. A motion to dismiss was defeated, and that's when the Senate decided to hear 3 additional witnesses. I think that's a pretty sound approach for us to follow. We had a unanimity in the Senate with respect to Clinton, but except with respect to Clinton procedure. But look, there are no rules here. It's, for example, what's an impeachable offense? I think the precedent shows that not all impeachable offenses are crimes. But it also shows that not all crimes are impeachable offenses.
Right. I hear what you're saying. Do you think that if there are no witnesses, I mean, you expressed a concern earlier in this interview that if the Senate trial is perceived as unfair as the House impeachment inquiry was, in your view, then the American people will feel like they've been hit by the same truck twice, or something like that. You said it better and more colorfully. Do you think that if the Senate trial goes forward and no witnesses are called, as Mitch McConnell wants to do it, the Senate Majority Leader, that will be the truck running over the American people a second time? The people will not feel like it was fair.
I don't know yet. I'll have to make that decision at that juncture. I would start by giving each side a good amount of time to present their case. I would give the prosecution, say, 24 hours. I would give the defense, the president, 24 hours. Then I would allow plenty of time, maybe 10 to 15 hours of time for senators to ask questions. Now, we can't ask questions. We submit them in writing. Either side, prosecution or defense, can object. And at that juncture, I think we should step back and say, okay, have we heard enough? Do we want to go further? I suspect at that juncture somebody will make a motion to dismiss. That's what happened in President Clinton's impeachment. The motion to dismiss was defeated, and the Senate decided to hear 3 more witnesses. It's also possible, I'm not recommending it, but it's possible for the Senate, through the presiding officer, the Chief Justice, to appoint a committee to hear additional evidence if the Senate thinks it's necessary. All I know today, Jake, is this: I don't know if we'll ever get the case. I don't know if we'll ever get the case. And I don't know why the Speaker's doing this. Maybe she's telling the truth, that she wants to dictate the policy or the procedure, rather, to the Senate. If she's sincere in that, I think it's unconstitutional. Maybe it's a cynical political ploy. Maybe her actions demonstrate indecision. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think in the meantime, go ahead.
Well, finish your thought.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I just want to ask you, because one of the...
I was just going to say...
Please.
Okay. I was just going to say, in the meantime, I would get back to work.
Okay.
I think the Senate ought to take up the USMCA.
One of the witnesses the Democrats want to hear from is from Trump aide Mike Duffy of the Office of Management and Budget. There are these FOIA'd emails, emails that just came out, that show that roughly 90 minutes after President Trump asked Ukrainian President Zelensky to give us a favor for the investigation into the Bidens and the other investigation, July 25th, 90 minutes later, Duffy ordered a freeze on the U.S. security assistance for Ukraine. Duffy, in that email, acknowledged the, quote, sensitive nature of the request and asked the other officials to keep the information closely held. Doesn't that make you, as a juror, want to hear from Mike Duffy?
Well, 2 points. Number one, executive privilege. Now, the president, as has just about every president going back to George Washington, asserted executive privilege in the House. Speaker Pelosi decided not to take the normal route and get a decision by a third branch of government. That was her call. In the Senate, if we tomorrow agreed with Senator Schumer, who I think is speaking for Speaker Pelosi, to call all of the witnesses that he wants, I fully expect the president to do 2 things: claim executive privilege, which is his right, and number two, demand his own list of witnesses.
Right.
Now, if the president does that, we could end up with a scenario where Chuck caught the car. The president's witnesses don't testify if the Senate doesn't want to pursue it in court, but Senator Schumer's witnesses don't testify, but the president's witnesses do. I don't think Senator Schumer would think that's fair.
Lastly, sir, I just want to ask you, President Trump just a few days ago retweeted an unsubstantiated claim about the identity of the intelligence community whistleblower. One of your colleagues and the senior members of your caucus, Senator Chuck Grassley, has been a champion of whistleblowers for decades. He has said in the past that it is, quote, strictly up to the whistleblower, this one, to reveal his or her identity, that the whistleblower should be, quote, heard out and protected. You, on the other hand, have said that the whistleblower should be publicly named. Why is Senator Grassley wrong? And do you think it's appropriate for the president to be identifying this whistleblower? What, I don't know if it's true or not, but identifying this individual.
I don't know who the whistleblower is. Number two, I think we ought to follow the law. Number three, there have been some allegations in the press about the identity of the whistleblower. If those statements are true, one of the thoughts I had was that, well, the whistleblower could easily be called by the defense, not as the whistleblower, but as a fact witness. It wouldn't surprise me if the president's counsel, being the good lawyers that they are, if we move to additional evidence, wanted to call the whistleblower or the alleged whistleblower not as the whistleblower, but as a fact witnesses. Number four, with respect to what the president tweeted, look, I have enough trouble paddling my own canoe, but I do agree with Mrs. Trump that, and I've suggested before to the White House that if the president would tweet a little bit less, it wouldn't cause brain damage. But the president does not have to take my advice, nor do I expect him to.
Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you, sir. Thank you so much.